What if the secret to a beautiful yard this summer wasn't more watering, more sprinklers, or more trips to the garden center, but simply choosing the right plants the first time? Most gardeners spend their summers chasing water, dragging hoses on hot days, watching plants wilt between waterings, setting irrigation timers and still losing plants to drought. And if that's been your experience, I want to be direct about something. That isn't how gardening has to work. That's what happens when you fill your beds with plants that need water, and then spend every season trying to manage the consequences. Perennials built for drought are different. They evolved in the places where rain doesn't come reliably. Dry prairies, rocky Mediterranean hillsides, mountain slopes that bake all summer. The plants that survived those conditions built their own systems: deep taproots, water-storing leaves, silver hairs that reflect heat. Those systems don't stop working in your garden. Today, I'm giving you 15 of those plants. 15 perennials that come back every single year and require almost no watering once they are established. By the time you reach number 7, you'll understand why one plant has been documented blooming on a dry hillside without a single drop of supplemental water for an entire season. And number 15 produces some of the most spectacular late-season color of any perennial available on almost nothing. If you want a yard that takes care of itself, hit subscribe right now. Let's get into it. 1. Yarrow, the plant that thrives on neglect. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, has been growing wild in dry meadows and rocky hillsides for thousands of years without anyone watering it. That isn't luck. It is adapted for exactly those conditions at the biological level. The taproot drives deep into the soil, sometimes 2 feet or more, pulling moisture from ground that is bone dry at the surface. While the lawn turns brown and neighboring plants wilt, yarrow is drawing from reserves the rest of your garden can't reach. That is literally how this plant survives. The flowers are flat-topped clusters in yellow, white, red, pink, and apricot, blooming from early summer through fall. They are extraordinary as cut flowers and dry beautifully on the stem for winter arrangements. A single established clump can supply a season of cuttings from a garden bed that hasn't been watered since spring. Lean soil is the right soil for yarrow. In rich, amended beds it gets floppy and produces fewer flowers. Planted in average to poor, well-draining ground. Full sun. No fertilizer. Cut back by half after the first bloom flush and it rebounds with a second wave in late summer. Divide clumps every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor. Traditional use, massed along dry sunny borders where nothing else will establish. As a naturalizing wildflower in meadow plantings. As a cut flower crop in gardens with poor soil and limited irrigation. The plant you put where water bills end. 2. Black-eyed Susan. The wildflower that fills in and never quits. Rudbeckia hirta is one of the most recognizable wildflowers in North America. Bright gold petals around a dark brown cone center. And it is one of the most drought-tolerant perennials you can grow. It evolved on dry prairies and roadside verges with no irrigation and no care, and it carries that independence into every garden it enters. When drought stress hits, Black-eyed Susan reduces its leaf surface area. It produces fewer, smaller leaves, a physiological response that limits the surface through which moisture evaporates. It looks leaner in a dry spell, not dead. When rain returns, it rebounds completely. The bloom period is exceptional midsummer through fall, often into October. Each flower is self-cleaning. No deadheading needed. Goldfinches target the seed heads in winter, making this a year-round wildlife plant with zero additional effort. Full sun to light shade, average to poor well-draining soil, hardy in zones 3 through 10. Once established it self-seeds and spreads to fill bare ground, a feature, not a problem in a garden designed to reduce work. Traditional use, naturalized in large sweeps along dry slopes and sunny borders, combined with coneflowers and catmint for a full-season no-irrigation prairie planting, left standing through winter for bird habitat and structural beauty. 3. Coneflower, the prairie survivor. Echinacea purpurea is a prairie plant, and prairie conditions are as close to drought as a garden can get, weeks without rain, baked by full sun, in thin soil with no one coming to help. Coneflower didn't just survive those conditions, it dominated them. Its root system goes deep and spreads wide, anchoring the plant and finding moisture through a broad zone of soil. The result is a perennial that barely registers a 3-week dry spell. By its second season in your garden, it is essentially self-sufficient. The blooms are large and daisy-like reflex petals in purple, pink, white, and orange surrounding a bold spiky cone. They bloom from midsummer through fall. Birds and pollinators rely on those seed-filled cones all winter. Leave them standing, they do more good than a compost pile. Full sun to light shade. Average to poor well-draining soil. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. Short-lived as an individual plant 3 to 5 years, but a consistent self-seeder. Your colony renews itself without any help. Traditional use, massed in full sun borders for late summer color. Combined with black-eyed Susan and catmint for a pollinator-focused no-water planting. Left standing through winter as a wildlife resource and structural garden element. 4. Catmint. The border plant that blooms all season. Nepeta focinii is the most reliably beautiful drought-tolerant edging plant in the perennial world. It mounds to 18 to 24 inches. It flowers from late spring through summer in lavender blue. It is pest-resistant, deer-resistant, and problem-free, and it runs entirely on neglect. The leaves are silver green and covered in fine hairs that reflect sunlight and reduce moisture evaporation. The same adaptation that gives lavender its silver coloring. Those hairs are drought adaptation made visible. The roots are deep and efficient. In dry conditions, catmint simply continues. Cut it back by half after the first bloom flush, and it reblooms in late summer and fall. 3 waves of color per season, no deadheading, no irrigation. Bees and beneficial insects cover it when it flowers. In terms of wildlife value per gallon of water required, catmint has almost no competition. The fragrance light mint and herbs releases every time someone brushes the foliage. Position it along a path edge and it perfumes every pass. Traditional use, as edging along dry sunny borders and pathways, under roses where it suppresses weeds and frames the base. Combined with Russian sage and yarrow for a silver and purple no-water scheme, the plant that finishes a border. 5. Russian sage. The silver cloud that needs nothing. Perovskia atroplicifolia doesn't require drought tolerance. It requires drought. This plant evolved on the rocky, thin-soiled slopes of Afghanistan and Central Asia, among the harshest growing environments on the planet, and it is most beautiful when conditions are most severe. In rich soil with regular water, Russian sage grows floppy and loses the silver intensity that makes it extraordinary. In lean, dry conditions, it becomes architectural. Stems turn almost white. The leaves go silver-gray. The lavender-blue flower spikes that cover the plant from midsummer through fall develop the hazy, atmospheric quality that makes it look like smoke rising from the border. Deer and rabbits avoid it completely. It is pest-free, disease-free, and essentially indestructible once established. The silver stems persist through winter, providing structural interest when the rest of the border is dormant. Full sun. Well-draining to dry soil. Hardy in zones 5 through 9. Give it space. It gets 3 to 4 feet wide. Planted at the back of borders, on slopes and hillsides, along fence lines where irrigation is simply not practical. Traditional use, as a back-of-border plant creating a silver and lavender backdrop for the rest of the planting. On dry slopes and berms where it naturalizes into a self-sustaining colony. As a deer deterrent along garden perimeters. The plant you put in the hardest spot. 6. Daylily. The battery-powered perennial. Hemerocallis, the common daylily, stores energy and water in fleshy tuberous roots that function like a battery. When drought stress comes and the plant is depleted, it draws on those reserves. It doesn't need your help. It brought its own. Established daylilies have been found growing and blooming on abandoned properties left unwatered for years, sometimes decades. They naturalize along roadsides in full sun. They persist through drought, poor soil, and total neglect. Few perennials have this level of biological staying power. Each individual bloom lasts one day, that's the name, but a mature clump produces hundreds of buds across a 6-week bloom period, creating continuous color without a single intervention. No deadheading required. With careful variety selection, you can have daylilies in flower from early June through August. Full sun to partial shade. Tolerant of clay, which most drought-tolerant plants dislike. Hardy in zones 3 through 10. Divide every 4 to 5 years to maintain peak bloom. That is the entire maintenance requirement. Traditional use, massed along hot, dry slopes and roadside banks where other plants fail, as the centerpiece of a low-maintenance summer border, in rows for a formal, repeated garden effect that requires no watering after establishment. The plant that colonizes difficult spots. 7. Lavender, the hillside that perfumes an entire valley. Lavandula angustifolia evolved on the rocky hillsides of the Mediterranean, where summer rain is essentially absent for months on end. In those conditions, lavender doesn't merely survive. It dominates the landscape. It covers hillsides for miles. It fills the air with fragrance so concentrated you can smell it before you can see it. That is the capacity you're bringing into your garden. The silver-gray foliage, slightly hairy, slightly resinous, reflects and repels heat the same way yarrow and catmint do. The taproot digs into rocky subsoil finding water that surface irrigation never even reaches. Every part of this plant is built to do more with less. Lavender blooms in early to midsummer with tall spikes of purple, blue, or white flowers that are among the most fragrant things in the plant world. Bees cover it entirely when in bloom. The dried flowers hold fragrance for years. The silver foliage is attractive year-round, even in winter. The one rule, drainage above everything. Wet roots in winter will kill lavender faster than drought ever could. Plant it in raised ground, on slopes, in sandy or gravelly soil. Get the drainage right once and lavender will live and expand for a decade or more. Hardy in zones 5 through 9. Full sun only. Traditional use, massed on dry slopes and hillsides where it naturalizes and spreads, as the backbone of a Mediterranean-style dry garden, flanking a sunny doorway, as a low informal hedge along a sunny path. The plant that makes a yard smell like a destination. 8. Lamb's ear, the silver carpet that holds its own. Stachys byzantina's velvety, silver-gray leaves are not ornamental. They are survival equipment. Those thick fuzzy hairs trap a layer of still air next to the leaf surface, acting as insulation against the heat and reducing moisture loss through evaporation. The same mechanism used by desert plants around the world. The silver color is how you identify that adaptation at a glance. Lamb's ear is grown for its foliage. That silver gray works with almost everything in the garden. It brightens shaded areas, tones down bright colors, and holds visual interest year-round because it is evergreen or semi-evergreen in most climates. In early summer, tall spikes of small purple flowers attract pollinators. Leave them or remove them, the plant doesn't care either way. It spreads by gentle surface runners that fill in bare ground and hold soil on slopes. Once established, it thrives in neglect. It is one of the most satisfying ground-covering perennials available. Average to dry soil. Full sun to partial shade. Hardy in zones 4 through 8. Does not tolerate wet conditions. Traditional use, edging dry sunny borders where silver foliage provides contrast. As ground cover under roses where it suppresses weeds without competing. On slopes and banks where it holds soil year-round without irrigation. The silver anchor of the drought-tolerant border. 9. Bee balm, the hummingbird magnet. Monarda, specifically the modern compact cultivars developed over the last decade, is significantly more drought-tolerant than the older varieties most gardeners have tried. The wild species naturalizes across North America in a wide range of conditions, including open sunny meadows that dry out considerably in summer, and the breeding work done on modern cultivars has amplified that tolerance considerably. The flowers are extraordinary. Shaggy, exotic-looking blooms in deep red, bright pink, purple, and white that hummingbirds locate from distances that are difficult to believe. Plant bee balm near a window or seating area, and you'll have a hummingbird show every afternoon from midsummer through fall. Modern cultivars, Bee Happy, Balmy Pink, and Sugar Buzz, have been bred specifically for compact size, mildew resistance, and reduced water requirements. These newer selections handle dry spells that would visibly stress older bee balm varieties. A deep soak once or twice during peak summer heat helps in extreme conditions, but established plants handle dry periods far better than their reputation suggests. Full sun to light shade, average well-draining soil. hardy in zones 4 through 9. Give it room to spread slowly. It expands its footprint year over year, which means more blooms and more hummingbird habitat with no additional work. Traditional use, planted near windows, patios, and seating areas for hummingbird observation. Masked with coneflowers and black-eyed Susan for a wildlife border with minimal irrigation needs, as the vivid color element in a long-season drought-tolerant planting. 10. Sedum, the plant that waters itself. Sedums are succulents. They store water inside their thick, juicy leaves and draw on that reserve during dry periods. While other plants are wilting under drought stress, a sedum is calmly depleting an internal supply that will last weeks without any help from you. The variety in the sedum genus is extraordinary. Low-growing matte formers like Sedum spurium spread across dry, rocky areas in ruby red and bronze, filling gaps in stone paths and walls. Upright varieties like Autumn Joy, one of the most reliably beautiful perennials ever introduced, grow 2 feet tall, produce broad flat flower heads that open dusty pink in late summer and age through copper to a rich bronze brown that holds through winter. Sedum is almost impossible to kill. It grows in rocky walls, in gravel in the cracks between pavers, on slopes where nothing else survives. It tolerates heat, drought, poor soil, and cold without visible stress. If you have a spot that seems genuinely hopeless, too sunny, too dry, too rocky, that is exactly where sedum belongs. Full sun, sandy, rocky, or average well-draining soil. Hardy in zones 3 through 10. No fertilizer needed. Divide every 3 to 4 years to maintain vigor. Traditional use, as ground cover on dry slopes and rocky banks where irrigation isn't practical. In the cracks of stone paths and walls where it spreads and fills without management. As the drought-proof anchor in a mixed perennial border that holds through the toughest summer weeks. 11. Creeping phlox, the slope that blooms. Phlox subulata in full bloom in April is one of the most spectacular sights in spring gardening. A mat of creeping phlox over a slope or retaining wall, covered so densely in flowers that you cannot see the foliage underneath, in white, pink, red, lavender, or deep purple, is the kind of display that makes people slow their cars down to look. And then the bloom finishes, and it becomes a tidy, dense, evergreen ground cover for the rest of the year. Needle-like foliage on low stems that stays just 4 to 6 inches tall, holds soil beautifully on slopes, and never needs watering, deadheading, or any management after the first season. The drought tolerance comes from an extremely dense, shallow root mat that shades its own ground and retains moisture beneath it. Once established in its first season, creeping phlox can go weeks without rain without any visible stress. Full sun, well-draining soil, it does not tolerate wet roots. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. A light shearing after bloom keeps it compact and dense. That is the only maintenance it needs. Traditional use, cascading over retaining walls and rock garden edges, covering dry, sunny slopes where mowing or irrigation is impractical, along stone pathways as a spring blooming edging that converts to evergreen ground cover. The slope solution. 12. Coreopsis, the yellow that goes all summer. Coreopsis is a prairie plant native to the dry, open meadows of North America with the same evolutionary history as yarrow and black-eyed Susan. Full sun, poor soil, unreliable rainfall. These are not challenges for Coreopsis. They are its operating conditions. The flowers are prolific, bright gold, yellow, red, pink, or bicolor depending on the variety, blooming from early summer through fall with very little deadheading needed. Thread-leaved Coreopsis is particularly drought-tolerant, with feathery fine foliage and a mounding habit that looks elegant from late spring through hard frost. Coreopsis is one of the longest blooming perennials available, providing color from June through October. During that time, it's also a constant nectar source for pollinators and a seed source for birds. It does all of this on almost no water. Full sun, poor to average well-draining soil, hardy in zones 4 through 9. Fertilizer makes it produce more leaves and fewer flowers, plant it lean. Cut it back by half in midsummer for a strong second flush in fall. Traditional use, massed in large sweeps in full sun borders for long season color, combined with black-eyed Susan and coneflower for a no-irrigation pollinator prairie. as the bright, cheerful color element that blooms from early summer through frost, the workhorse of the summer border. 13. Liatris, the prairie spike that never needs babying. Liatris spicata, blazing star, is one of North America's great native prairie perennials. It earned that reputation in the same way yarrow and black-eyed Susan did, by thriving in conditions most plants can't survive. Dry summer heat, poor soils, no irrigation, not just surviving, blooming brilliantly through all of it. The taproot pushes deep into the ground, accessing moisture reserves far below the surface. And because Liatris also stores energy in corm-like root structures, it builds reserves season over season. A mature plant grows more drought-tolerant every year, not less. The flowers bloom from the top of the spike downward, the opposite of most flowering plants, in vivid purple from midsummer through fall. They are extraordinary for cutting and dry perfectly on the stem. Monarchs, swallowtails, and bumblebees cover Liatris in bloom. Goldfinches target the seed heads in fall. Full sun. Average to dry, well-draining soil. Hardy in zones 3 through 9. No deadheading required. No supplemental water after the first season. Divide every 4 to 5 years to maintain vigor. Traditional use, as a vertical accent in full-sun drought-tolerant borders. Massed in prairie-style plantings with coneflowers and black-eyed Susan. As a pollinator and butterfly garden centerpiece that never needs watering. The spike that earns every inch of space it takes. 14. Gaillardia, the wildfire color that blooms on nothing. Gaillardia, blanket flower, is native to the dry, open plains of central North America and blooms in colors that look like they belong on a desert sunset. Bold rings of red, orange, and gold surrounding a raised bronze center, from early summer through hard frost. It is one of the longest blooming and most genuinely drought-tolerant perennials in existence. The root system is deep and fibrous, reaching moisture far below the surface. The foliage is slightly hairy, reducing evaporative loss. The entire plant is built to perform at its peak in dry conditions, and unlike plants that merely tolerate drought, Gaillardia appears to bloom more freely when it's slightly stressed. Rich soil and too much water make it floppy and short-lived. The dry garden is not a limitation for this plant. It is the ideal. Individual plants tend to be short-lived, 3 to 4 years, but they self-seed readily, and seedlings establish in even the leanest, driest spots in the garden. A colony renews itself continuously without any management. Full sun, poor to average well-draining soil, hardy in zones 3 through 10. Do not fertilize. Do not water once established. Let it self-seed freely. That is the entire care requirement for a plant that blooms 5 to 6 months every single year. Traditional use, massed on dry slopes and sunny banks where it naturalizes and blooms without irrigation. In gravel gardens and rock gardens where it fills gaps between stones. As the vivid color anchor of a prairie-style planting that looks after itself. The wildfire that burns all summer without fuel. 15. Salvia, the last plant to ask for anything. Ornamental salvias, particularly Salvia nemorosa and its cultivars, come from dry Mediterranean regions and the rocky hillsides of Central Europe. Their biology is built to extract maximum beauty from minimum water, and when conditions are at their driest, salvia is often at its most striking. The leaves are slightly rough and hairy, moisture-reducing adaptations shared with the rest of this list. The roots are deep and efficient. The flowers are produced in tall spikes from late spring through summer in violet, blue, purple, pink, and white. And if you shear the plant back after the first flush, a second full bloom follows in fall. 2 complete bloom seasons per year on almost no water. Caradonna is the most striking cultivar, deep violet spikes on near-black stems that photograph beautifully and hold for weeks. Maynight produces the richest indigo in the group. East Friesland is one of the most reliable reblooming varieties available. Every one of them is as beautiful as anything in a garden center, and every one of them asks almost nothing once it's in the ground. Full sun, well-draining soil, hardy in zones 4 through 9. Cut back by half after first bloom for a strong fall rebloom. Divide every 3 to 4 years. Traditional use, as the vertical flowering element in dry borders and sunny mixed plantings, combined with catmint, yarrow, and lamb's ear for a completely self-sufficient silver and purple scheme, as the late-season color that bridges the gap between summer and frost, the last plant to ask for anything, the first one to reward you in return. 15 plants. One principle behind all of them. The right plant in dry conditions doesn't just survive. It often performs better than plants that need constant management in the right conditions. Yarrow produces more flowers in poor soil. Russian sage becomes more silver and more beautiful under drought. Lavender is more fragrant when it's slightly stressed. Sedum holds more visual interest in its second and third season than its first. This isn't counterintuitive once you accept it. These plants were built for these conditions. You aren't working around their limitations. You're growing them in the environment they evolved to dominate. Pick 2 or 3 from this list that match your sun exposure and your honest watering habits. Plant them this spring. Water them through the first summer while the roots establish deeply and infrequently, not daily. Then step back. Come back in 3 years and tell me what you think. Drop a comment and tell me which one you're already growing and which one you're trying this season. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. We post every single week. See you in the next one.